Let's explore autistic history and the Autism Wars. This is part 106 of the series. All right, we are back in 1993, and I'm sharing an article that was written by Bernard Rimland about pervasive developmental disorder and his thoughts on that diagnosis or label. I've shared about half of it already in the previous interview, and I'm going to pick up here where I left off. All right, he was talking about his book, Infantile Autism, being published in 1964 in the last video, and it contained, the book as an appendix, a checklist titled Form E1, and the E stood for experimental. Within a year, E1 was replaced by the Form E2. As of June 1993, the Autism Research Institute has collected over 1,600, or 16800, is that 16,800? My brain hurts with numbers. All right, E2 forms completed by parents of autistic and possibly autistic children in over 50 countries. Form E2 is available in 8 languages, he says. He also states Form E2 is designed for completion by the child's parents and asks questions about the child's early development and about language and behavior through age 5.5. After age 5.5, autistic children begin to change in many ways, so it is better to rely on behavior prior to that age. Once we receive a completed E2 form from a parent or professional, we enter the data into our computer, derive a score which tells the child's position to the continuum, ranging from classical autism at one end to not autistic at the other. It's 1993, my friends. All right. And mail a report to the sender. We have performed this service free of charge for well over a quarter of a century for thousands of parents and professionals worldwide. Readers of the ARRI are invited to request E2 forms and avail themselves of this free service. Is this the precursor to the ATEC form through Defeat Autism Now? I don't know, but I'm wondering. All right, he also states a major purpose of this effort is to collect data for statistical analysis. There is no doubt that the spectrum of autistic disorders contains numerous subtypes, some of which are large enough to be identified as our database of almost 17,000 E2 forms. We are already aware of some of these types, such as classical Kanner syndrome, autism, Fragile X autism, Rett syndrome, and Candida-caused autism. Oh my. All right, so my colleague, Dr. Stephen Edelson, and I are conducting factor analysis and cluster analysis of the E2 database in order to identify and characterize these and other subtypes. The database is large enough so that the subtypes identified by cluster analysis with one segment of the database can be confirmed by cross-validation on E2 data, which was not used in the original identification of subtypes. I don't know if that's making sense or not making sense. That is not my area, this type of research. So if someone out there is more familiar with this type of research and wants to chime in on the logic of that, that would be helpful. But I'm going to go back to what Rimland was saying. All right, he goes on. As this work advances, we will report on progress in the ARRI and in other places. Subtypes identified through this means of statistical analysis can be validated in a number of ways, independent of the E2 database, including family history of variables, clinical laboratory tests, and differential responses to drugs and other treatments. It is thus hoped to place the diagnosis as well as the treatment of autistic children and adults on a more scientific basis. I believe that progress in this field will proceed faster if we rely on the identification of subgroups through the analysis of statistical data rather than on constructs based on speculation, conjecture, surmise, and subjective impressions. In the meantime, let's get rid of PDD. Oops, PDD. 2 Ds, not 3. It says here at the bottom, the article appeared in the Autism Research Review International, Volume 7 to 1993. All right. Well, there's that. I did not even know until reading it that there was war even on the term of PDD between these autism fronts. That was new to me and interesting, surprising, but PDD in the West still very much is valid and in use today. So, Now next up, I'm going to jump us forward into 1994, but we're going to stick with Bernard Rimland and his writings in this article he titled, "Recovery from Autism is Possible." Ooh, and there, just the first paragraph is a hint of the Autism Wars that are happening. Rimland writes, "Autism. The word seems synonymous with controversy. There is hardly a statement that can be made about autism that has not been challenged. The most recent controversy concerns the concept of recovery." This is 1994, and here we are in the autism fronts speaking about the concept of recovery. It is, oh boy. All right, let's just see what else he has to say. Over here, he says, conventional wisdom has held from the very beginning that autism is a lifelong disability and that while some individuals may improve, autism is always there. States, conventional wisdom notwithstanding, we are beginning to hear increasingly about recovery. The matter deserves our close attention. Reports of recovery, partial recovery, or near recovery come from several sources. If you're starting to hear echoes of Generation Rescue and the Jenny McCarthy era, you're absolutely right. This is the precursor. All right, mysterious, spontaneous recovery. It hasn't happened often, but it has happened often enough for the phenomenon to be worth noting. Over the past 25 years, I have received a handful of letters from parents which read something like this. Please remove our address from your files. Our child has continued to improve so greatly, we don't know why, that now he is no longer considered autistic. We think it best that he never even find out that he was considered autistic, so we don't want any mail coming into our home with the word autism on it. Oh boy. All right. In a few of these cases, we have received follow-up letters years later telling us that the formerly autistic child has now graduated from high school or college or has gotten married, but please don't write to acknowledge this letter. All right, next up, Rimland is going to be sharing about some personal accounts and is going to be talking about Temple Grandin and Donna Williams. Temple Grandin, most people have heard about. Donna Williams is part of Autistic History, but I'm going to share that in the next video. There's just a lot in here I'm still just trying to process. Whoa, the ableism is just a shock to the system. Yeah, all right, so thank you for joining me and learning a bit more or exploring a bit more autistic history.